Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Fernay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Fernay.
It's Maryland Crab time.
Hey, this is John Fernay, and Tim Hamilton's over there across the table. And we had to figure out what we were going to talk about, and we thought that with the booming, I guess, Hispanic Latino population in the county and the city, that might be an interesting topic to do. And
we brought in the unofficial mayor. That's that voice here is Walter Vasquez. He is the owner proprietor of Sin Fronteras. It's a restaurant on Old Forest Drive in Parole, and he's got one up in Pasadena or Glen Burnie.
Glen Burnie.
And he's got several other businesses. He's an entrepreneur and a businessman, and he's got his finger on the pulse of the Latino community in Annapolis and in the county, in fact, too. So he's a good friend of John and mine. We go to his restaurant quite a bit. That's where I get my mail sent. If you've not been to Sin Fronteras on Old Forest Drive, it's probably my favorite restaurant in town. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Without a doubt. I totally agree there, and it's a good place. Absolutely.
And that's where I practice my Spanish. For example, ¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
It's not going to be near there.
No one has answered that yet. But so hey, Walter, thanks for coming in.
Thanks very much for having me.
Walter's also, that is my office away from office. That's where I have all my meetings up there. It's fantastic. And that's the mole sauce is phenomenal.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. So you come by way of Miami.
Yes, actually, I was born and raised in El Salvador. So I come from a very small town, El Salvador.
But you have that Miami kind of panache
exactly.
to you, yeah.
Yes. After that, members of my family, actually, my aunt, she moved to Miami in 1976. So she got married in El Salvador with this guy who was a surfer, who happens to be from Miami. And then
a surfer?
Surfer, yeah. And then there were two guys staying actually in El Salvador, still there. Robert Rottingham is still there. He owns a hotel down there. If somebody wants to check La Libertad, it's a beautiful place to stay there. So he never came back. He stayed there. He's been there for 40 years. Anyway, so we moved to Miami in 1990 myself. And so what it really was interesting for me to see Miami as a cosmopolitan city. If we look at it in every single possible way. We have all types of ethnical groups, food-wise, culture-wise, art, music. And so I moved there. I started working in the restaurant business while going to school to learn your language, English.
What would you major in?
Political science.
Naturally.
That's interesting.
That
Yes.
explains a lot.
Yes, my family and my grandfather was a politician for a year. My wife, who I met in Miami, her father I just retired about a year ago, but he was a politician for 40-something years. He was a mayor. He was a congressman. He was a speaker of the House in Honduras. He was also a governor. So he had 47 years of experience.
And Miami politics is to like the Latino community what Chicago politics would be to like the Irish, right?
Correct.
Or New York. So that's
yes,
ground zero.
We do have a lot of input in politics and any affairs, not only politically but socially and financially in Miami. So,
what's the population, Hispanic population down in Miami? Would you say percentage-wise, about ballpark idea? I mean,
probably rounding up to 40%.
40 to 50.
But you have a good mix down there. You have Cubans, and Salvadorian, and Dominican, so South American.
Colombians, Argentinians, a huge, believe it or not, Peruvian.
Whereas in Annapolis, it's more monolithic. It's mostly Salvadorian.
Salvadorians, Mexicans, and I would say some of them from Guatemala, and now it's going to be from Honduras.
But mostly Salvadorian. Mostly
Salvadorians, yes.
But Central American, definitely.
Yes, there are actually, it's considered in this the 3 states, which would be Virginia, Maryland, and probably D.C. considered as a state. It's not a state. Anyways, we have 750,000 Salvadorians.
That's Salvadorian?
That's what they say.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. It's huge.
But I know Northern Virginia has a big population.
Yes.
And they seem to they're having the crime problems that we don't have here, like the MS-13 and but we seem to kind of escaped a lot of that here.
Well, I think when it comes down to that, the population itself has a lot to do. It depends if we tolerate that. I think in this area where I love, my wife and I, we moved from Miami, and I was going back there. At the beginning, it was kind of difficult for us because we were used to that different life that we have in Miami.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, you say you were in Miami because it was such a cosmopolitan city, and then I'm like, well, okay, so how do we end up in Annapolis?
Well, I'll tell you how it ended up here. After September 11, actually, South Florida took a major financial hit. Pretty much, it was very difficult, and I worked in the restaurant business, and people didn't go out much as they used to before. So I had a friend of mine and a brother who lived in Annapolis for a few years. So they invited me over. I came here. And at the time also, I put an application everywhere. So I got a job in New York for doing collective bargaining agreement negotiations in Espanol for Local 100. Sodexo, which is a major food company out of France, and Merrill Lynch. So I used to handle the grievances between employers and employees.
Which is a highly political job in so much as...
There we go.
Right,
yeah, that was one of the reasons they liked this, because my ability to talk the language and also negotiate and pretty much between, because you have huge lawsuit that might come down if you don't have the right moment to negotiate between the employees and the employees. So that's what we do there. So we so this area here, my wife and I decided to give it a shot. We bought a house in Glen Burnie, and today, actually, it's funny that we got in Miami. We still have a small place. My wife has a house in Coral Gables. After a week or 2 weeks, we got to come back here. We feel like this is home for now, believe it or not. So it was a very difficult transition at the beginning. By now, we know there's a lot of work to do here.
Well, there's been a lot of changes in the last probably 10 years.
Yes, and I have the privilege to be since day one here. I remember the first time that I went to the meeting with Josh Cohen at the council meeting they do, and when they heard this accent, everybody was looking at me like, and I asked them, well, by the way, my name is so and so, and I'm new here, and I would like to know how this works.
You're not white or black,
but it's and it was interesting. Today, I can tell you, we started. We suggested to do one of those websites in Espanol. They did it. Now it's a lot of outreach for the Latino community. So now the Latino community have come more into place and to play an important role than it used to 9 years ago when I first moved here.
Let's go back a second. So describe for us, because everyone they just see the Latino or Hispanic or a Salvadorian community, and to them it's just they're there. So describe to me how the community's set up in Annapolis. It's like a city within a city, right? There's basically 3 or 4 neighborhoods where they tend to cluster, as all immigrant groups do when they first get here for the first couple decades, is they cluster together. Along Forest Drive, you're seeing all the mercados and all the taqueras and all that stuff. But I mean, explain to all the Anglo population how it works.
Well, what it is Latinos are like anybody else. We look with a new opportunity to work. And that's one of the things that they always say, that a city or place or an area that offers work, it will have a huge immigration for Latino, because that's what we look for.
And that's what happened to the Eastern Shore. The Eastern Shore was lily white. Well, it was white and black when I was growing up. And now you go over to like Georgetown over on the Eastern Shore, and it's mostly Latino because of the poultry industry.
Really?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not taking notice of that. Okay.
Well, but here, if you read in Annapolis before 2000, maybe, there were not even 3% Latinos. Right. Today, we're looking at about 18%.
And they estimate it's maybe as high as 25.
Maybe a little bit higher. Yes, probably a little bit higher. So, and so one of the things that got my attention, my wife's attention too, is that we didn't see much participation of Latinos in the affairs, in the actual political affairs, business affairs, financial affairs. So it got my attention, and I noticed that a lot of people with a huge potential, because one way or the other, and I can tell you this, the Latinos are by nature hardworking people. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very structured, very hardworking, and we assume we accept the role that we are the labor, and we start there. Like maybe the Irish, you Irish descendants, Mr. Hamilton, I think, probably you ancestors, they did the same way when they moved to this country. They were the harder people. They worked harder, so you had a better future.
I think it was the same pattern. They came in, it was manual labor jobs people didn't want. Then they started buying little bits of property, and then they started forming companies doing that hard labor, and then their kids were born, and their kids started intermingling in the schools with so they kind of straddled cultures.
Yes.
Like I see that now when my kids go to school with all the Latinos from Forest Hills, and they're part American, they're part Salvadorian, they're part there's that mix there that it takes 2-3 decades before.
We got here. I think we accelerated the process for various reasons. One is because there is a demand for a second language, for Spanish.
Sure.
A person who is bilingual here, it has a huge advantage. Because it's a communication skills, and a lot of the workers, for example, my little one is only 18 years old. He is perfectly bilingual. He's taking French now anyways, but at the moment he goes to apply for a university in this area, he will have a huge advantage because it's a necessity. If he wants to be a doctor, that's why he's going to be a doctor. He will have a disadvantage because be able to communicate in two languages. Not only the language, but he has the two cultures. He might understand a patient better than somebody who doesn't understand the culture than when it comes down to the job.
And more than any other country, I think the United States, at least when compared to Europe, we don't put an emphasis on learning several languages.
No, we don't. Most of the world is bilingual or trilingual.
We don't make an effort.
Europe has, usually most of them are trilingual in Europe.
But remember that, yes, because in Europe, from one border to the other border, you find not only different ethnic groups, but also different languages and religions. The United States of America, if you remember with the doctrine, Monroe Doctrine back in the days, in the 1900s, it was pretty much isolated. So there was no need. So if you go from New Mexico to California or to Alaska, wherever you went, it was the same language.
Right.
And pretty much it was. So today we see there is a huge necessity because this country is based on immigration. Today we have a lot of talk and issues about immigration, but it's always been like this.
All right, so going back to the way that the Latino community in Annapolis functions on its own. So you have essentially 2000, you've got a probably 5-6%, so that's 15-16 years ago. But then there's more work, so they call back home or they send notice back home going, hey, I can get you a job, or
yes.
I got work. So they come up here, then they start marrying, they have kids, and they keep sending. Because I worked in an industry for 10 years locally that had a huge Latino population, and I saw it grow. But everyone was from the same village or two villages back in El Salvador, so when they come, they all knew each other. They just kind of almost like they picked up their villages and moved it here.
Yes.
And there was these hierarchies, and there was they had their own set of rules. It was just amazing to me that they weren't integrated, but there's an order to what they did.
Right. We do have that little structure, if you want to call it, within our own communities, our own people. That, like you're right, there are people from some parts of El Salvador that literally they moved a lot of them, and the other one called someone and made it here and called, by the way, you want to come, we're going to help you out, we're going to set you up with jobs, and that's how people follow. And then when you get here, they have their little structure. They have how to rent the apartment, how to go to work, how to get this. But now the idea is for us how we can translate that into the American culture.
And there's been a big leap, and this is what we're talking about. Is I noticed this about 5 years ago, where I saw a lot of the Latinos who worked in the garden industry or landscaping. They broke off and formed their own companies. Marvin Tejada, Marvin Landscaping does a phenomenal job if anyone's looking for anyone. But these are highly skilled guys who are doing highly skilled stoneworking and highly skilled at irrigation and landscape lighting, and these are guys that broke off, and now they're hiring other Latinos. So that's the big jump for them. So I saw a big movement in the last 5 years of Latino businesses have absolutely exploded. We call that up where Sin Fronteras is. That's being called Little San Salvador. That's because you're there, and it's they own properties, they own houses, they own businesses. Forest Drive has all the restaurants and businesses along. It's amazing how they've sprung up.
Yes, because one thing is a lot of people and a lot of Latinos, they look, when somebody has a little success, they look at it and they know they can be done. That's something that my wife and I, we always try to encourage people to get educated, to understand the language, to understand the system, to understand the rules, to understand the regulations, how to start a business. Actually, we do coach people. I'm very glad whenever the time that I have free, I'm glad to coach anybody. But I've been doing it for a while.
So people are coming to you if they got to get through a permitting process, or
exactly.
they need it for insurance. You're the one that they're coming to. You're the guy who knows the rules in the system. So you're the go-between between the established, Anglo community and then the immigrants. So,
right. It's a process, because one of the things some people have come to me and say, Walter, I would like to open a business. It's okay, it's fine. I understand. So how? And they ask, okay, the first thing I ask him, what kind of business? And the person say landscaping. I ask him, have you worked in the landscaping business for a while? Yes. Okay, we okay now. And now we had to know how you have a name. You had to start looking for you're going to be a corporation. It's going to be an LLC,
license
sole property.
And bonded.
Then we go
and
to exactly. We go to all those what we call formalities. And then what is more important for me is how you got to say. I tell them up front is business is not that easy. Otherwise, everybody will have businesses. It's very difficult, but it can be done. How you do it is you have to have, and this I always tell everybody, you have to have a business plan. If you don't have it written, which should be the best thing, but if you don't, you got to have in your mind what exactly you're going to be offering that is better than somebody else.
So John and I have talked frequently about the challenges that new businesses or existing businesses have working within the city. And to be fair, this is probably problems that people have in most cities or most municipalities.
Sure.
Do you think that the language barrier, certainly, is there a cultural barrier where if it's for two middle-aged white guys or a young white person who's starting a business, it's difficult for them, and presumably culturally you'd say they have a head start, but for an immigrant coming in, does it just exponentially become that much more difficult to start a business?
The hardest part of the business is for a Latino is the paperwork. Mm-hmm. Because in all fairness, and I remember this when I sat down with Josh Cohen, and I called him and I say, you should take advantage that we are here. You should train people, have workshops to train us how to do businesses, because we are willing
Which
to
would be
work
great for everybody.
Yes, it will be we're willing to work probably for a little less money and to do a little bit harder work, because we need it, because we're not from here, because we have families. And this is we decided to come here because of work. We didn't come here for kicks. We came here because we like to work with some more opportunities. I asked him, I remember we had the conversation, said you should go ahead, instead of give the whole contract or landscaping to one company, probably in Ohio or somewhere, who probably you never see the money. When you chop it up in 20 little pieces, you get the Martinez, the Rodriguez, everybody, and the money stays locally. We circulate the money, and everybody's a win-win situation for everybody. So the employment goes down, the money stay here, there will be more money, so there will be more spending money, and the families can have here. So we have a very solid economy. Unfortunately, he didn't win, and that is one of the things my wife and I like to see more is the participation of Latino in the small businesses. I hope eventually they become big businesses, but as it is, we have to start with baby steps. And that's what the hardest part is, the paperwork. All these formalities, how do the taxes, how we do the accounting, licensing, permitting, everything. But the city lately has become more easy, a little bit easier to work with than it was when I started.
Well, I know the city and the county have really tried to streamline permitting processes and whatnot, and I know they're looking to endorse or embrace the Latino community. I'm just looking at the county is about 9% Latino.
Yes.
And the city is at 16.8, and that was in 2010. So the city Latino and to put that in perspective, it's 26% to Black or African American and 60% white for the city of Annapolis. So it's a growing community.
Fast.
That's going there. Question. Back at home in El Salvador or Guatemala or Argentina or wherever. Are permits establishing corporate structures, are those non-existent down there?
No, it's completely different. Down there, see, one thing that I like about the American system is that it's a fair shot for everybody. A little bit more difficult because of the language, of course, but the language is still that official language is English. And now we have Espanol. We have actually, I think we can have a liaison here in the city of Annapolis. So, but the structure is a little bit different. Actually, I would say the American structure, when it comes down to business, is a little bit easier.
How so?
Because everything is informed. Everything you have, all the paperwork, you just fill in the blanks. This is going to be it. My corporation, my name, and you go for the licensing. So I think it's pretty much make easier. Now, how the offices the agencies execute that, that's a little different story. But exactly what it is, and when we go there and we see the paperwork, it's there. How you're gonna have a corporation, you're gonna everything to have a identity, you can have it, and it's not that hard. The hardest part is the process can be a little bit faster.
How's the city responded to the increase in the Latino population? I mean, or the county? I mean, I think it's kind of a slow process, and the water is boiling slowly, and people get used to it. What has been now, and to put it in perspective, if you want to win the mayoral seat in Annapolis, you've got to look at the black vote. That's an important part of it. Where do Latinos come in at this point? That with that formula, which they have not been ignored, but hasn't been courted either. They haven't been seen as a voting bloc. They haven't been seen as someone that you had to go to in order to be elected.
Can I interject real quick before you get onto that? Just I'm looking at the census numbers here with the 60% white, 26% black, and the 16% Latino, Hispanic. I mean, you sit there and you mentioned that the black vote is critical to winning the mayor's seat. Typically, the African Americans vote Democratic, and typically we have a Democratic thing. So yeah, obviously that is because if you take the white, and they're either split between Democrat and Republican, which they aren't, but I mean, then there's some that just don't vote. I mean, the black population at 26%
which is a Democrat
is typically a solid voting bloc,
right?
Is there? And then you look at the growth of the Hispanic thing, and obviously, is what you're saying is that these are you've come here, you want to work, you want to do this, and that's a population that you need to look for.
Right. I would say in the next few years. Actually, I don't have the number correctly, but a few years ago. There are a lot of kids that were born here, a lot of Latinos that become American citizens.
And they're all probably middle school, high school at this point.
There you go.
That's your baby boom right there.
Exactly. That's in the next 2 to 3 years.
So yeah, they're between 12 and 18 now.
Yes, it could be a huge chunk of kids.
That was Walter's Donald Trump impersonation there. It's going to be huge.
It's going to be very... I think in the next years to come, and that's what we're trying to do here, to organize that, Latinos will have pretty much one of the biggest impact in local politics.
And by the way, going back to my Irish heritage, there was a great book called "When the Irish Became White," because they weren't considered white till the early 20th century.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the reason being that they passed, and they became middle classes. They discovered politics. And they discovered that that they were a voting bloc, and they started running candidates, and that's how that was their backdoor in. And that's become kind of the stalwart sign that your group is gaining clout, is when you start running candidates of your own and start voting as a bloc. When that happens, all of a sudden you're players.
Well, that's the idea, because since I moved here, I noticed that a lot of kids. We're talking about in 2007, my wife and I would move here. But in the last few years, at that time I knew there were a lot of kids that were 5, 7, 10, 12. Now they're 18, 17, 15. That's the baby boomers right now. So what we're looking at, probably the number is not accurate, but I would say probably 400 votes. Easily, it's more than that. But let's say, to be safe, 400 votes in Annapolis.
In a town where
you need 3,000 votes to win an election.
Yeah, that's significant.
It is pretty much, and not only that, but remember that it's growing, and a lot of those kids, they don't understand the process. So those votes are there, and whoever goes and understands the Latin culture can get them. And the idea now, what we're doing is try to see how we can form alliances, politically speaking, for the coming campaign, for the coming election, which is in 2017, and then it will be strong. So let's, for example, Afro-American Latinos. Believe me, if we can do that, and we can work out an alliance and find the candidate that represent the best interest of those two communities, we can swing that election in a given second.
Yeah, in an election, the last one was what, 58 votes?
59, 54, somewhere around
54.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's significant.
It's probably a number that keeps Mike awake at night.
Well, all right, so that's where it gets interesting, because we were talking about this before you got here, the whole identity politics, which has defined this general election. It's defined by conservative and liberal, not necessarily Democrat and Republican. But we said that also, and you and I talked about this, does it really matter on a city level? Does it matter if you have a Democratic or a Republican mayor? But if saying you describing the recent immigrants over the last 15 years, they want to work, they want to form businesses, they have they're going to start worrying about government red tape. that when you say that, that's Republican. That right there is that all of a sudden you're ticking off, businesses, business interests, starting businesses, having government stay out of regulation. Those are very Republican issues. And of course, Miami is pretty, especially the Cubans are notoriously Republican.
Right.
So I don't know if that's going to come into play because, again, I don't think we happen to be Democratic, but we have a Republican mayor and he didn't run as a Republican per se. But the election's going to be between, as it is right now, it's going to be between Mike Panelides and Gavin Buckley. So presumably, well, he said he's running, but he's got to get So
he's filed the paperwork.
Okay, so
he's in there.
Well,
paperwork.
The thing is, when it comes down to local politics, and that's something that you and I, we have spoken about it, and now Mark, my friend Mark Rodriguez, you know him.
Mark Rodriguez, for people who don't
nice.
know, Mark Rodriguez is the aide to Jared Littman, who is the Ward 5 alderman, and he's going to run for Ward 5.
Right.
And this is something...
Which is not a fiercely contested ward generally, by the way.
Jared Littman had seen the need for some sort of Hispanic representation, and
yes, he
reached out to Mark to see what he could do and to sort of bridge that to be a more effective alderperson.
Yes, and that's helped a lot because Mark is interesting because he was born in Mexico, I think, and he's Irish-Mexican. Mm-hmm. So he's bilingual and bicultural, extremely smart.
That's an Irish guy who can tan.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And very, very smart, and what I think about Mark is, and it's pretty much, and that's what Mark and I, we connect very well because we see beyond political parties. I know he's very democratic, and I understand that. And that he represents that, but he understands that when it comes down to local politics, the political party should not have a big impact as much as the person.
Thank you. I totally agree. We're not talking about abortion or anything. We're talking about potholes potholes and sidewalks.
For me, it's very important that the person who's going to represent the city of Annapolis, regardless of the political affiliation or political preference or party, if I say that, party affiliation, should be more the person who is going to willing to represent the city who has different ethnical groups.
Well, yeah, and we've gotten very parochial. I was thinking about this the other day, that if you look at the way the city, and we're a very small city, but we're broken into very, very well-defined areas. Hyper-defined areas. Like Ward 1 is hyper-defined, and that is, that's overwhelmingly white, wealthy. I'm not saying rich, but they're wealthy. But then you look at all the public housing, and they're shut off from the rest of the city, whether by design or by happenstance, whatever.
Yes, uh-huh.
And then now you have probably 3 or 4 Latino neighborhoods that are more loosely defined, but probably 3 or 4.
3 or 4, yes, that's right.
So if you're an alderman, let's say that you're a Ward 5 alderman, for example, you're going to have white and Hispanic. If you're Ward 6, you're going to have you're going to have black, white, and some Hispanic. But if you look at let's see, Alderman Kirby, for example, is that he is when anyone within public housing has a problem, even if it's not in his ward, they're going to come to him because they can relate to him more easily than
it's a cultural type.
It's
of
a cultural thing, right?
Yeah,
there was an issue at the 7-Eleven on West Street when they first opened up. They fired some African American people and they protested, and I talked to them and they were like, "Well, I'm going to talk to." They lived in actually Fred Payone's ward, and they said, "Well, I want to talk to my alderman." I said, "Well, Fred Payone's your alderman." I said, "No, Kenny Kirby's my alderman."
Yeah, it's people. Yeah,
and that was I understand that.
Yeah, well, it's cultural.
So you would say, let's say that he wins the election, which I think he has a good chance of doing, just all things being equal, because again, Ward 5's never been really hotly contested. But let's say he wins that, I think that all of a sudden, yes, he represents Ward 5, but he's also a voice for the Latino community.
Exactly.
So if anyone who's living in you have a Latino who's living in
Ward 3,
they're going to come to Mark because he speaks the language and he understands the culture a lot better than a white guy would or a black person would,
No offense or Rhonda Pinchel Charles.
Right. So, that's where all of a sudden, we are talking about identity politics, but we're not talking about ideology. We're talking about experience.
That's for me more important because Mark and I, like I said, we talk very, very often, and we have something in common, which is the Latino community. Then it's to represent as best as we can to help this Latino community to blend into the system. For us, I see Mark is doing a great job. He's new here. Mark, he understands the Latino community, but not only that, he is a man who he has his hands on everywhere, and he does it because he likes it. He enjoys that. He has the passion to do that. because honestly, he can easily work anywhere else he wants.
All right, so let's say that Mark is in. Let's say we have Mark. Let's say we have someone else who's Latino who's in role. What do you see? I mean, the city is reacting to the Latino community, and I think one of the things that happens is Alderman Lippman. His initiative was to have a liaison to the Latino community and then one to the African American community. I think one for the African American community has already been appointed. Nice guy. What's his name? John's giving me a blank look.
For the Larry.
Larry, yeah, Larry. Larry's a great guy.
Larry Griffin from We Care and Friends.
Yes.
Larry Griffin
Pulled it out.
Yeah, he's the African American liaison.
Yeah, he has the organization. Actually, Larry and I, we go back many years ago. I know him very well.
Good guy.
We Care.
Yep.
He comes to my restaurant all the time. We talk about it. Great guy. He is probably one of the most positive person that I met in this area.
I agree.
Very positive, very hardworking.
We Care and Friends does great work.
And he means
work.
well. That's what pretty much I think is a great guy. I think the city, that was a great addition they did.
So the Latino liaison, what does that look like to you?
I would love to see. This is funny.
And while we're unless anything happens in the next week, there's an interview process going right now, and Mayor Panelides is searching for a candidate. I think I think Mark Rodriguez has suggested a few candidates, and he's vetting them. But ultimately, let's say that you are forming what this position will do. What do you see this position?
What I would like to see is somebody who is not only the language. Because a few years ago, Mike, I think, a gentleman, Daniel Buccelli, great guy. I met him, had the opportunity. He's a very nice guy, but he was more American than any of you
He
guys,
spoke the
probably.
language, but he didn't understand the culture.
See, for me, it's to understand the culture, to understand the necessity of that culture, or that community, more important. See, being the language, believe me, somebody who puts his mind to that can learn it. But the culture is something that you have and you got to feel it. That's very important. Mark, for example, I can support him any given day because he feels that culture. He has it. He understands it. He goes for it and he works for it. He will do anything for his culture, and he does it the right way. And besides that, he's a very, very, it's a very fair person. Because I think not only for me as a Latino, we gotta, if we want to be, we have our rights and we want to have be recognized, but we also got to comply with our responsibilities.
And I think when you talk about cultures, it's interesting because I think that and I don't think the Latinos are any different than any other group that comes in, like from the Greeks, the Chinese, the Italians, the Irish. Is that you cling to that for a while, but then you start to Americanize. And I'm seeing that right now, where you're seeing that these kids are in school, that they're eating the same foods, they're watching the same shows, and I see you go to a car dealership and you see Latinos in their 40s are buying cars. So I think when I read in the Capitol the comments, people who are somewhat xenophobic because change is scary, but you're saying it's they're not taking over. They're not. I mean they're bringing culture, but they're also taking in the American culture, and they're kind of melding the two.
It is a beautiful thing.
If you go to El Cabrito, which is on Forest Drive, right. That's it's you get a quick bite and everything, but it's Latino and it's white and it's black and it's all because it's you're kind of discovering each other there. That's
right.
That's,
one thing that you remember we talk about it in my restaurant is one of the things I like about our restaurant Sin Fronteras is that feeling that if you are and walking into a place where you can find different types of ethnical groups.
It's like in Ellis Island where you can get a mole sauce, right?
Yeah, you can go and,
really good
and you find anything there, and that's the idea. That's is our idea. What we like to see in this area is a very blended community that they don't. We see beyond the ethnical groups, beyond the political preferences. We see beyond religion preferences. We see just a city that we all live here and we can live together.
Okay, so
get better.
Back to the liaison. So let's say Senor Vasquez is coming up with the whole concept of the liaison. What do you have them do? What is their role in the community, and what is their role within cities? So what is their day to day?
I would love to see what I would request. I would ask to do is a liaison is to go to the city to see. First, the one thing is the language barrier. It's for schooling, for permits, for the transitions, for those legal issues that we need. We need that we face every day. For example, you see a person who wants to ask for a permission for a house or for a deck in the house. The person probably will not be able to communicate that to the person who is working in the office.
So they go to the liaison.
The liaison will do that. One day, also the police. Probably it's not a big deal, but there is a barrier there to break the barrier culturally. I mean, in the language first, and then culturally. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I saw this guy. I was in my restaurant, and I saw the lights of the police right across the street where I own the barbershop. So I saw they had somebody stop there.
I was in your restaurant that day.
So I went there.
Yeah, you were livid.
Yes, I went there, and I went there to see because I noticed something. The guy I saw, the policeman was a Caucasian, and I saw Latino, which I happened to know the guy who's around 50 years old. Didn't know anything in the language, so I said, I'm going to go ahead and see if he needs any help. I went there, and I asked the guy, and I asked the police. The police recognized me, he knew me, and he said, I asked him, what did he do wrong? And the guy said, I think he was peeing over there, and I'm going to arrest him. And I told the guy, look, I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do, but culturally speaking, in Latin America, it happens a lot.
Right.
And the police was absolutely polite. He told the guy, look, I'm going to let you go this time, but do not use a bathroom, please. Don't do this. So one of those little things that we need a liaison for, because there are little differences between culture that can mean a lot in the long run. And we need that also because we want our voice to be heard. And the voice for anybody, regardless if they talk the language or they don't. Regardless they understand the system or that they don't. The idea is to everybody to understand the system. They want everybody to talk the language. But you know what? It's not reality. The reality is what we have and how we deal and how we make that easier for everybody. And I think having a liaison, if answering your question, is to have that bridge, to make it, that gap, to make it smaller when it comes down to any differences that we.
Where does that? I mean, okay, the liaison is great, and I'm for it. Does it stop someplace else? Do we need to have a Asian, liaison? Do we need to have? I mean, what cultures that are also growing? I mean, the Asian culture is growing as well. I mean, we're sort of America is becoming, and Annapolis is sort of a little microcosm of it, but we're becoming sort of this melting pot. Where the white population is shrinking a little bit, the black population, and everything's sort of coming up together into this little, 25, 25, 25.
Well, I'll be honest, though. I did question, this is where I get the hate mail. I did question the African-American liaison, and I think that was done in a sense of fairness. And I just question that because you look at a cultural difference. The reason I think that I look at a Latino liaison for that reason is that when you have a new group, an influx of new group over 10 or 20 years, you're going to have that clash of cultures, which is you're going to have those customs, you're going to have those issues where people don't understand.
You had an interesting comment on that I believe it was on an article on the Capitol that was really, it said it's sort of a lather, rinse, repeat. It was like a new. I wish I could remember.
Oh, it was just There's a process when people come in. It's
they're rejected. They're
rejected. They occupy the bottom rung, and their kids are that bridge between their culture and the next culture. So that first generation never really connects, but it's the second and third generation that do, which happens relatively quickly. But then all of a sudden, once they're assimilated, they pile on with everyone else on the next group coming in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I think that there was a sense of fairness that the African American community received a liaison of their own. But to me, that you've had a group that's existed for a long time, and there certainly are issues, especially within public housing. But aren't we already taking care of that? Isn't that the point of having HACA or having?
Well, I mean, to a degree, also your alderperson as well. I mean, there is no effective political representation.
So before I get any shit from anybody,
when Mark Chang was elected to delegate,
mm-hmm.
He used to work for the county executive, and he got elected delegate to North County. He's Asian, and he's I think Korean,
mm-hmm.
and he's really been very effective as far as bridging the gap between that. I mean, is a liaison a political office? Should an alderman be considered liaison? Should Kenny Kirby and Sheila Finlaysa Finlayson and Rhonda Pindell Charles be considered the liaison for
at
the
a
African
certain
American
point you
community?
do, because it's how that community identify with, and it's the same thing with us. I think it's in all fairness, I think that all politicians are those liaisons. I think because they represent certain groups. In this case, Mark Rodriguez, for example, will represent partly, not
By
completely,
default.
but he will represent the Latinos. But I think Classy Hoyle, she represented the Afro American when she was in. She worked as an elderly person.
Yeah,
so
certainly.
I think we represent that. The idea, and one of the things that I always would like to see here is, and that's why right now it looks like it's very hard. But the idea is to have everything coming, like you say, together, to have this cosmopolitan city, and where we see, like I said before, beyond those differences that we have ethnically, religiously, culturally, and we become part of Annapolis or Arundel versus Latinos or Afro-Americans or Caucasians, what we're talking about.
So this
here.
might just be an awkward transitional period that we're going through.
It is going through, and I think in a few years down the road, you might see more Ramirez and probably Ramos or Vasquez having seeing as a normal, probably a law office with a name or stuff like that. And that's the idea. And next to it is going to be the Smith, and it's going to be the Afro-Americans, and that's the idea. Miami is a perfect example. That's one going back when we started this conversation is. Living in Miami for me was absolutely great experience because I saw how a different types of groups, ethnically and not only ethnically but in political status, social status, how they come along and they give the identity to Miami. And that's for me is something that I always will. I love to see that, and I would like to see it around here that way.
You said you mentioned before we started here that you had purchased a house here in the city. You lived up in Glen Burnie, and you said we're going to see a Vasquez. We're going to see a Vasquez running for alderman or mayor or something like that.
No, I don't see that happening. The simple fact is that I think we all should know what we do best, and I think I
Como
do
se
best.
dice puppet master?
No, I see it. I would like to see more to help the city. The way we've been doing it, my wife and I, in the last few years, is to try to blend into the system, help our Latinos to become more successful and become more part of this area that we choose to live.
So we talked about Chief Pristoop in passing a little bit ago, and in the news yesterday, actually, I think the African American Caucus of Leaders, headed by Carl Snowden. They gave him a vote of no confidence. Now, it doesn't really mean anything because they're not a recognized group of any sort of official.
It's like us saying,
right? So, and obviously, Carl Snowden's been very, very critical of the police chief. I mean, I think John and I are of the mind that there's always room for improvement, but he's done a pretty good job with what he has. Someone who's more learned than I might disagree, but what is the interaction do you find the police have with the Latino community? Is there fear? Is there just no contact much? Is it true there's a stereotype that the Latino community can be victimized by crime, and because of their aversion for the police, they don't go to the police? And I don't know if that's true.
I will say the police department also does have they do have a Latino liaison as well for the
great guy,
for the police.
Mr. Hudson. That guy, he understands the culture, even though his last name is Hudson. He understands the language, but he really understands the necessity of the community. I think I had the pleasure to talk to the guy. I met him about 7 years ago. Great guy. I think the city, the police department they did really well when they hired the guy. Because what it is sometimes is we go back to where we started, language and culture. But I think Latinos overall, they're not afraid of the police. The only thing is just a difference is how when they stop you, how the police, is he upset because they don't understand the language? Is he nice? Is he going to arrest me? Is he did I do something that probably I don't know that I did something wrong, which I ignored that. So that's the thing, and I think the chief of police has done really well because he hired. Not only that, but the police, they before they do anything, try to call Mr. Jackson or somebody, or acknowledge somebody's around there when they make a stop, somebody talk the language, and to see make that if it's going to be
awesome.
arrested. And I think that's very good. The police here, I think overall they're very good. I had the opportunity to meet a lot of them, and they very patient. Of course, there are some exceptions when the moment might require something different. But overall, I think they're very careful and they try to work it out the best way they can.
It's funny. I'll tell you. I do want to get to like your opinion on Crystal Spring, which is a hot topic in a minute. But funny story. You talked about the Hispanic, and oh my God, I don't know what I did. A great story in high school. My roommate was from Ecuador, and we were going down to South Florida for spring break, and I got pulled over for doing 100 and something or other on 95. And the cop comes down, and Pablo says, "I'll take care of this." And I'm like, "What?" He says, "Just shut up." He was driving. And he says, "Just shut up." And he had an international driver's license at the time. And the cop says, "Boy, you're speeding." He's in Georgia. Okay, so we've got this. And Pablo's like,
"There's going to be a problem."
"Speeding? What?" He says, "Yeah, you got you doing 105 miles an hour or whatever it was." He says, "What? 10 mile an hour over speed limit? You don't give anybody a break?" And he's got the heavy accent. I mean, he's naturally, and he's going on. And the cop's like, "What are you talking about, boy?" He says, "Yeah, the sign." He points to it. It says 95. And the guy's like, "You dumbass. That's the road number." And he says, "You follow me." And we drove a mile down the road. We stopped in front of a 65 mile an hour speed limit. The cop pulls him out there and says, "That's the speed limit." And Pablo goes, "Oh my God." Hijo puta. He goes on. And the cop let us off. And I said, "I can't believe that freaking worked." But it was, but it was pretty amazing. But it's
with me, I do a lot. I mean, I understand. That's one of the things that also the police, teachers, all those little details. That's when we need the liaison. We got to communicate the teachers and the parents with the kids, how the kids can do better, what are they not doing well, what not assimilating. Same thing with the police, same thing with the businesses. So I think a liaison is needed, but we need the right person, the person that will do that job according to what we need, not just to fill in the position. Is that somebody who is qualified to do and understand the culture, and that's
hopefully we have someone in there pretty soon.
I hope so.
You had said earlier about the Latinos and the Hispanic community comes in and they want to do the jobs, they want to work, and they want to build businesses, and they want to build futures and everything else here. One of the big buzzwords that's going on is Crystal Spring, and I personally am in favor of it. I think it's going to be wonderful. I know Tim and I disagree with whether the traffic can be handled.
We got to point out that you and I both live along the Forest Drive corridor. That kind of shades my view, and I'm not against it. I just got to say that. The traffic is what is not. That's the one thing that's not being addressed.
I think that can be mitigated. I think we do need the studies to do it, but I think that certainly is. I think that's the least of the worries there. The school argument is a red herring. Just because the people that are going to live in a non-continuing care community. I mean, first of all, what young family is going to move into middle of a continuing care community in $400,000+ townhomes or apartments? So there may be one or two, but not too many. And the environment is obviously the big thing there. But then
I think that's what sucked all the oxygen out of this, and I find that with a lot of the I consider myself an environmentalist, but I feel that the environmental aspect of all of the developments that are going in, that becomes the cause to defy it.
Well, that's the go-to thing. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's the thing saying, "Oh yeah, you're cutting down trees, and Ellen Ware got us to be a tree city or something like that," which is a great designation, and development is there. But Walter, what's your thought on Crystal Spring?
Well, this, I know this question was going to come at a certain point. Yeah, as you know, I think Crystal Spring. See, what we notice in this city of Annapolis, the decision-making process, I think, should be done according to what the system that we created, and we got to follow and believe the system.
So you're saying, here are the rules. They followed the rules. Let's do it.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, this is not disliking context. It's what the rule says. I think that Janet, the owner, she has the property rights. Besides that, and we're looking at it, advantage and disadvantage, I think the city of Annapolis needs more. They need Crystal Springs to be built. I'll tell you the reason why. See, the city of Annapolis, most of the money
Mm-hmm.
and you should know this. Most of the revenue comes from real estate property taxes
and fees,
commercial and fees. But I think it's about 70-something%. So this it's come from taxes, real estate property taxes, commercial and residential. So if we don't have any development, you keep on pounding the same people in taxes. This city, the taxes are very high. I don't know if you guys how much you pay, but it's extremely high compared to the rest.
Oh, we're in the county right now.
At the county, this is the county, right? But the city, that's one thing. Second thing is the city also needs to accommodate those who want to retire. I mean, there are a lot of people in the Navy. I see you have a Navy shirt. A lot of people, they spend their life with the Navy, and that's their life. They would love to stick around here and have a place where to live so they can go and visit next to the place where they defend. And besides that, Crystal Springs, they are saving pretty much all the environmental, all the requirements they ask for, they're doing it. The thing for the Latino perspective is work. They will bring at least during construction 800 jobs. And to be probably most of the jobs will be done by Latinos because that's the type of work that we do. After construction work, they will keep 350 to 400 jobs. No level entry because they are committed, the builders, to train people to not to go make $8 an hour, but to get better salaries. So if you see it from that's what it's very attractive to us.
And do you see, like, if you have these developers that come up with these large projects at some point where they see an ally in like the Latino community and they're trying to push it past the NIMBYs and the red tape, then all of a sudden they're going to you guys going, hey, can you get behind this project?
Well, for me, I'm looking after the best interest of the Latino community as well as the city. But there are a small group of people in this city that and environmental, and I think a lot of us, we have some, we are environmentalists at a certain point. We are environmentalists, but also smart growth has to take place because the city. I mean, this city probably 20 years ago was smaller.
Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of changes in 20 years I've been here.
And so, and that Crystal Spring will be a great impact and a positive matter for the city. I mean, traffic. People over 65 years old, how much do they travel? How much do they drive? How many of them they go to school? How many of them they work? So we're looking at, and they have the life planned. They will be spending money in services. They will spending money employing people cleaning their houses, helping them out probably to take them to restaurants, the basic services. So pretty much it's a win-win situation for the city. Now, there is a small group, like I said before, that they live on the water and they don't want it to be disturbed. And that's a different. And it became political in a political battle. But if we're looking at it in all fairness, what are the legal grounds that we have to stop somebody who has complied with pretty much with everything?
You heard the difference between an environmentalist and a developer?
Yeah.
Is a developer wants a house on the water, an environmentalist already has a house on the water.
Live on the water, yeah.
Right.
And so, to me, is what is fair is fair. For us, as part of the Latino community, I would like to see Latinos to get those jobs and to start working, that, like I said before, starting their own little companies. But also, I live in the city, and I would like to see the city beautiful. Well, the city is not what Crystal Spring are saving the trees that we're supposed to save. And they are. Right. And probably it's a bigger number.
Well, I think we're going to see this come to a head pretty quick here.
We would love to see that because I think everybody is thinking about and everybody understands that it's a small group of people. They have taken this to the personal level. And I think it's totally unfair to take something out of proportion when legally we don't have any grounds to stop somebody who owns the property.
Right. As long as they're developing it within the confines of the law.
Yeah, but the thing, what I see with this, with the administration today, everybody's passing the buck.
Well, yes. Because there's a race right now and I don't think it's any secret, is that the mayor said when he was elected that he was going to prevent Crystal Spring from being built, and I think now the chickens are coming home to roost, and I think he may be regretting saying that in such strong terms.
Right.
But we have an election coming up next year. And
well, you look at any new political candidate, Mike Pantelides, you look at Larry Cohen, you look at Donald Trump, the things that they're saying. I'm going to stop Crystal Springs. Well, it's not that easy, Mr. Mayor. Larry Hogan had come through with the campaign stuff. He's finding that working with the delegation is a little bit more difficult. Trump wants to build his wall. That's not happening unless he's going to Home Depot to pick up the cement and the bricks himself in a pickup truck.
Right. With Crystal Spring here, I think the city, and this is very interesting, there are places, there are counties around this area that would love to have a project like that because of the employment for the economy that we need. I try to Forest Drive very often, pretty much 4 or 5 days a week, off and on hours. I have not, unless there is an accident, I have not make more than one stop.
I totally agree with you, and everyone says how horrible it is. Now, I live right down here behind the Giant. I go up, and when my kids were here in school, I was doing it 5 and 6 times a day getting there. And again, if there's an incident, I'm screwed.
Anywhere.
You're screwed. And that's a whole other thing.
Anywhere.
City doesn't know how to deal
happen
with.
Anywhere.
But typically, not a big deal. I wait
one turn of the line.
If I get caught at a red light, I wait through one cycle of light, and then I'm through.
I will say that improvement they made 7 years ago
when they widened it.
That was because it used to be if you're coming inbound, you were on Aris T for a long time, every day, and you don't have that anymore.
And that would be a little bit of my position on where I think the traffic may not be that much of an issue for Crystal Spring, because if you remember when they widened that, everyone was squawking, and there was a stupid Verizon pole that sat in the road for 7 months.
I forgot about that.
But Leopold was really holding everybody at bay, saying, "Hey, wait until it's open.
And it was right.
It will make a difference." And sure enough, man, they opened up. They got that pole out of the road, and they opened it up, and it was like, wow.
Yeah, it's true. Like going back to Crystal Spring, for me, I think it's that small group of people. It's pretty much the night in the city, the night in Latinos to have the opportunity. Because for some of those people, most of them live in the water. I can't hold it against them because they're well off. I have not, but you got to understand one thing. That is their opportunity, our opportunity to help this Latino community. That community, that hardworking people, they need that work, and also it will be great for the city.
Right.
So we are denying a win-win situation because a small group and because someone, a mayor, said that, and today they still, I think, probably he regrets that. I don't know if he doesn't, but the reality is, we have to understand that this city, if you want to live by yourself, go to Montana, you buy the street. By 200 acres, I understand that.
You're there.
But yes, but here it's going to happen. Development will take place, and this project I think is very attractive because the truth of the matter is that are complying with everything. I think the city has asked more than they were supposed to, and they complying with everything. So my question is, where do we draw the line? Where are they going to say enough is enough? Let's get it done, because it's like if you go to a job interview, you have all the qualifications, you did everything, and they say, well, let's see. It's totally unfair. It's totally. I think we should be, the city of Annapolis should understand that it has lingered too long, and it's time to stop it and finish it up. Let's approve it and let's go.
Let's go. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of time, we are out of time.
Wait, before we go, because I see you got your piece of paper there with all the cheat notes about one thing. All right, we started this thing. We said the Sin Fronteras is our favorite place. One of our favorite restaurants.
Thank you so much.
Right?
Oh yeah, I love it.
And it really is. And if you've never been, Old Forest Drive and Old Solomon's Island Road, right next to the sketchy liquor store. Don't worry about that. Go next door. You have the best.
He's a friend of mine. He's a great guy too.
Yeah. Best Latin food anywhere in town. But where do you go? Where's your favorite place? And this is totally ripping off the Annapolis podcast.
Yeah.
But we're shameless.
I repent. Actually, I think every single place in Annapolis has its own.
And you're not running for mayor.
No, I'm not. I know that. But they have a beautiful. They all have very good. In Annapolis, we're lucky. They have very good places to eat. I go to a lot of places. My wife and I, a lot of places. One of the places we like to go is Big 909.
It's ridiculous. We were just talking about that.
Also, Tsunami.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think they have great food. There are a lot of good places. I think those are the two places that we visit a lot. the little lobster sandwiches on Main Street. Mason's.
Oh, Mason's
Lobster.
fantastic.
Yep.
Excellent. So I think, what's the other place I really like? Level.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Tapas, jalapenos. So we go out a lot. So we try to go to local, operated restaurants.
We're lucky. We got a really deep selection of really great restaurants locally.
We do.
Has that new Mexican joint on West Street hurt you at all?
Which one?
That Taco Bell?
Oh,
I think
yeah.
So is that okay.
Actually, they're doing very good commercial. I think they're helping me out because they bring some people over. I don't know.
I'll tell you, takes care of that post midnight rush.
So if you haven't yet, you got to get over to Walter's Place.
Thank you.
909. It's serious, or Divid 909. Enjoy that. But the Sin Fronteras, that seriously is probably my favorite restaurant in town.
Appreciate it.
Sin Fronteras, translated without borders.
Without borders, food wise. For us, I like to, because my food is not just for one region. We have
It's not Mexican.
We do have Mexican
Yeah.
influence. We do have Cuban, parts of Peru, Central America. We put it all together.
Right.
That's exactly what it means. It's a fusion with the new word that's going to come into place, which is very new in Miami, called mixtura. What it means is a mix between not only cultures but different types of ingredients and food.
Very cool.
Well, thanks for coming in, and so thanks for listening. And you can find us on Facebook, on the Facebook group and the Facebook page, Maryland Crabs. Go to themarylandcrabs.com to look at other episodes you might have missed.
And you should.
Oh yeah, they're really good. And then Twitter at MD Crabs Podcast, at MD Crabs Podcast on Twitter. Email info@themarylandcrabs.com. And on Twitter, you can find me at Tim Hamilton 47 and John at Annapolis.
And what you need to do is go download it, subscribe on iTunes, and when you're on iTunes, give us a rating.
And review.
A 5-star rating would work.
Yeah.
Before I would like just to say one thing to people in Annapolis, in this area, I hope. The Latinos, we're here, and I think we would like to be part of the system. We are already. So I think if we can all get along, make everything, let's help us out, let's help each other, I think the city can be greater.
Here, here. Can't say it any better than that.
All right, Walter. Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Adios.
Gracias.
De nada.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.